You're listening to 5 Live Boxing with Matt Dawson for another 26 minutes. Steve Bunce, you're alongside me, and you could your last 26 minutes, Steve?
Just getting going by about 10:30.
You can just tell I've calmed him down a little bit. Mike Costello and Richie Woodhall are in Hamburg, looking ahead to Saturday's heavyweight showdown as David Haye takes on Wladimir Klitschko. We've talked about both boxers, but what about the men in their corners? Richie, you were trained by your dad. What sort of role did he play in the weeks building up before the fight?
Yeah, massive role. Obviously, my old man was very good at tactics and what to do against certain fighters, and he was a good coach. So, yeah, I mean, a good trainer can win or lose a world title fight. At the end of the day, the tactics have got to be right. And I got on really well with my dad, and it was a job. And the father and son really never come into it. It was a job that I had to do, and he was the right man to get the tactics right. I think Adam Booth. For me, the Dark Lord, as they call him, I thought the tactics against De Gale was absolutely fantastic. And why they were so good is because it surprised absolutely everybody. But at the end of the day, you've obviously got to have the talent as well in the boxer to carry out those tactics and keep to the game plan. And it's going to be very tough for David because, this is the World Championship of the world and it's the heavyweight title. But he's got the tactics right up to now as Adam Booth.
And what about fight night? Was the coach get right involved, or is all the work done?
All the work is done. I always say that a fighter has to adapt to the contest himself. The trainer, when you come back at the end of the round, okay, he can give you guidance, he can give you encouragement, but when you're actually out there, you've got to adapt and you've got to do it. When you come back to the corner, he'll be telling you things that do sink in, that you might change here, you might change there, but you do that yourself anyway. That the trainer, in my opinion, the work is done well before the contest, the tactics in the gym, the build up to it. That's when he plays a vital role. But on the night, myself personally, it's the fighter who has to adapt and change his style accordingly.
I do think some differences can be made though, Matt, because we've gone across to the corners occasionally during these big fights, including David Haye fights, and one in particular against Nikolai Valuev. At some stage during the middle rounds of the fight, we went across, and Adam Booth made the point to David Haye that he was coming down in terms of speed. He was coming down to Valuev's level, and so just that little tweak, he told him to just speed up everything you're doing again, and that helped to change the course of the rest of the fight. So tiny instructions like that, and the key is that there has to be trust between the two, between the boxer and the trainer, for those 60 seconds to be important. And on that occasion against Valuev, they were very important because potentially the fight could have slipped away from David. Had it been close, the judges would have given it to Valuev.
I agree, but Mike, at the end of the day, it's the fighter who has to do it, and the trainer acts as a guidance really, and you've got it right there in terms of tweaking style and tweaking things here and there which the boxer will absorb, but he's got to do it himself and he's got to stick to the game plan. And George Groves, for me, did it fantastically against De Gale.
Richie, bear with me because we're going to have a little bit of role play. Right? It's a little bit off the cuff here, Buncey. Bear with me, but you are the perfect man for this.
Go on.
All right, I reckon we're in about round 3.
Yep.
And you are David Haye, Buncey.
Yep, I've come back to the corner.
You're coming back to the corner. You've had a couple of jabs. You've been grabbed.
Have I been knocked down?
No, knocked down. But just he's been connected. You've been connected, all right. But those jabs have been coming through, and he's grabbing you. Not happy with the referee either.
Yeah.
All right, Richie, you're the trainer. Give me a bit of heavy breathing, please, Buncey.
No, it's only the end of the 3rd round. David Haye's not going to breathe.
Come on, just get with it. Get with it, man.
Adam, he really hurts, Adam.
Richie, Adam, sorry.
What are you playing at now? Just keep your hands up. Just stick to the game plan. You're up and down like a lift at the moment, son. Come on, else you ain't going to get to the end of this fight, and that's it.
It's easy for you to say. You ain't the one getting hit by 22 stone of Ukrainian muscle.
Listen, if you come back to the corner when you've had a round like that again, I won't even be here. So just get out there and let's get on with it.
And I tell you what, if you could put a sentence together like that, after being smashed around the ring after round 3.
The strange thing is, Richie and Mike and everyone listening, is that I actually think that what Adam Booth is doing, I think he is actually shifting that dynamic in the corner. I really do. I mean, you talked about, Mike, you mentioned earlier on when George Groves was there, about how they choreographed moves and they put them into play. And it's you'd think that would be nearly impossible, but it's not. They worked. They broke the ring down into sections, and they worked knowing exactly what James De Gale would do, and James De Gale helped them out by following them around for 12 rounds. And against Valuev, Mike, when did David Haye put a foot wrong in that fight? Adam Booth was just tweaking and talking and controlling and cajoling because they'd spent 4 intensive months. They train, you know, sometimes they finish at 11 o'clock. They can still be in their gym in Vauxhall or their gym in Cyprus till 4 in the morning talking.
Mike,
and they're not on the phone tweeting, they're talking about the fight.
Mike, you've done plenty of coaching. This, what did you call him, Bunce? The Dark Lord.
Dark Lord, Adam Booth.
The Dark
Mike knows
Lord,
him well.
Adam Booth. I mean, you know him well, Mike. Is he always this calm, calculated character, or does he sometimes have to? I'm sort of drawing on other sports. You know, sometimes you get a real feisty, in your face. You know, we had Sean Edwards on earlier, who can be, you know, getting very, very aggressive.
Part of his makeup.
But then sometimes he was quite placid. I mean, does that work with Adam Booth?
Yeah, he can do that. It just depends on the situation. And most of the time in a big fight, what a fighter wants to hear is a calm voice and wants to hear short, sharp instructions. He doesn't want to hear a trainer talking. By the time the fighter sat down and gets up again to answer the bell for the next round, you're probably talking about 40 seconds of time to get your message across as a trainer. You want just 1, maybe 2 short, sharp instructions, not a long catalogue of what he's doing wrong and what he can be doing right. Short, sharp instructions. And another instance of Adam Booth being terrific in the corner when David Haye won his first world title against Jean-Marc Mormec, again in France, away from home. He got knocked down in the 4th round, did David Haye, pretty heavily as well. And when he got back to the corner, Adam Booth said to him, basically, I can't remember the words, but he said to him, take a holiday, just get off around the ring now, get your senses together, and then we'll pick up the fight later on. Exactly. And then after the 6th round, he said to him, you're back now, you're throwing 30 punches around, just as we planned. So it's all so scientific. And as David's senses were coming back, he started to talk to him in a more detailed way. And that's where Adam Booth has been so impressive all the way through. And, you know, it's funny, before the fight against James DeGale, he was dismissed by many. George Groves against James DeGale, I'm talking about now. He was dismissed by many as a fitness guru and not much more. And now all of a sudden, you know, he's one of the world's greatest trainers. He's always been very classy in the corner.
I mean, there's 2 proper trainers there, aren't they? Adam Booth and Manny Stewart. Steve, I mean, this Manny Stewart's a legend. He's coached he's trained some of the greatest sporting all-time greats.
It has, and he's a bit Manny the mercenary the last, say, 25 years, because he goes and works with the highest bidder in different corners, and he can switch corners. But you know, he actually started off when he was a full-time electrician, putting in hours in a community gym, a community centre in Detroit called the Kronk, which famously became the Kronk Boxing Club, which was one of the greatest places for producing champions. Anyway, in the history of boxing, the Kronk has produced, I mean, it's probably whatever 30 or 40 world champions have trained or been based there. And Manny learned his trade that way, with carloads of 15 and 16-year-old boys driving them 300-mile round trips to have them box, including, of course, the great Tommy Hearns, who he shaped from a 7 or 8-year-old boy and shaped him through some enormous fights. Tommy Hearns was involved in great fights with Roberto Duran, Marvin Hagler, which he'd like to forget. In fact, Tommy has forgotten it on account of being knocked spark out, and Sugar Ray Leonard. Now, Manny was involved heavily in those fights, and that's when it was the best against the best. And he's also involved with Lennox Lewis in some big fights, including the Mike Tyson fight. He is a guy who has served a massive apprenticeship, and sometimes that's forgotten because he is a bit of a mercenary at the moment. He's a voice for hire, and he says the right things, and he goes into corners, and he worked, I think, quite disgracefully with Nassim Hamid at the end of Naz's career, where he wasn't that bothered. He just showed up, you know, for 3 or 4 days before a fight. But people tend to forget, and this might upset some people out there, Angelo Dundee did the same thing with Muhammad Ali for the last 10 years, showed up the last week. He wasn't involved in 3 months of training.
So Manny Stewart's been in some enormous. I mean, some of the biggest fights in across the weights in the last 30 years. I bet Manny's been involved in 6 or 7 of some of the biggest fights, both grossing and popularity, and also excitement, raw excitement. And he's also compared Wladimir Klitschko to Lennox Lewis.
Wladimir, for a very tall guy, has great coordination, which is unusual. I always have a saying that when you get over 6'5", you lose coordination. That's why small heavyweights can beat some of the big guys. Lennox was the first heavyweight that I spent a lot of time on working on footwork. And Wladimir has footwork also, and maybe even a little bit better footwork than Lennox, some of the guys.
You've also spoken about him as being one of the best right-hand punchers that you've ever been associated with.
Lennox Lewis is one of the few guys who can knock a guy out with one single right hand. And he's been doing it with his left hook, which makes him maybe the most dangerous fighter, and no one looks at that, but most of my fighters, Thomas Hearns, even Chavez, Oscar, Lennox, they usually hurt guys, eventually knocked them out. But Wladimir will have a fight going on where nobody's ever been hurt, and just one punch out of nowhere, and the guy is knocked out cold. If he would be more aggressive, he would be the most dangerous heavyweight ever in history.
So what does David Haye bring to the ring that all of Vladimir's previous challengers did not?
David Haye brings to the ring speed and power, but more than that, a mindset of a winner. He thinks and feels and acts and believes he's a winner. Very confident. It's something that Wladimir has not had to experience since his first fight with Sam Peters, which was about 5.5 years ago. So this is a whole new energy that David Haye brings into this fight that Wladimir has not had to deal with.
You said that Wladimir is more emotionally charged this time than you've seen him at any stage since the Chris Bird fight when he became champion for the second time in 2006. Does that bring with it for you a bit of concern that he's that charged up?
Wladimir being more motivated and emotionally charged for the fight with David Haye, something that I enjoy. He will not get away from his boxing strategy. It just means that when he sees an opportunity, he will let his missiles, as you say, go a little faster than he has in the past. But he will come in with a very confident, still laid out strategy. He's learned from his inexperience in his fight with Corey Sanders and with Brewster the first time, to be patient and stay to his plan. So that's what he's gained in almost 60 fights. So he knows how to follow his orders, so he will be okay.
And give us an overall perspective on this contest, Manny. You've been involved with Leonard against Hearns, Hagler against Hearns. Where does this stack up?
I think it has the possibility of being one of the classic fights. You know, it could possibly turn out to be one of the ugliest fights too. Also, the boxing ability, and I think that David, regardless of what he may say, is going to come out and fight a fight very much like he's fought with Valuev and all the other big guys, which is trying to move out of the way, explode at select times, and stand at a distance. That's what I believe is going to happen. Wladimir is going to have to force the fight, I think. But I think just on emotions being involved and both being tremendous punchers, that the fight will end up being a knockout.
Mike, Manny Stewart there, he wants Wladimir to be more positive. He thinks he would be more dangerous if he was more positive.
Yes, he does, and he's been trying to instill that in him since he took over the coaching of his career in 2005. And I went to a coaching clinic with Manny Stewart at the Hilton Hotel in London earlier this year. It was held across a Sunday morning and into the early hours of the afternoon. And he was talking about some of the unconventional things that Wladimir Klitschko does. For example, he very rarely runs, which, you know, it would be like blasphemy to most fighters. But what he does instead is, at the start of every training session, he just dances around the canvas for around 30, maybe 40 minutes. And he says that that's the movement that he needs for a big fight. Those are the kinds of muscles he needs to strengthen for a big fight. And so that is a targeted piece of training rather than just running up and down the streets needlessly every morning. And the point I'm making here is that Manny Stewart, in trying to instill discipline, is trying to impose a bit of his authority on the relationship, whilst at the same time allowing Wladimir Klitschko to do some of the things and the habits that he's got and the routines that he fosters and has done since he was a pupil, as Steve said, in the Soviet sports system. He's trying to mix the two, but so far he hasn't been able to convince Wladimir Klitschko to be more aggressive. And this goes back really to what Richie Woodhall was saying a few moments ago about the trainer can do so much, but once the bell rings, it's up to the fighter to carry out those instructions and to reshape the strategy as he sees fit. And one of the problems for Wladimir Klitschko, of course, is that he's been knocked down so many times and he's been beaten inside the distance 3 times that, yes, he's come back and deserves great credit for coming back. I think we shouldn't underestimate that. But he is clearly so gun-shy because he's been decked 12 times.